Support for Comics for Fun and Profit is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's Performance Package is the ultimate in men's hygiene. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer, 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code C4FAP at manscaped.com. I've been with Manscaped since the 1.0, and now we're on the Lawnmower 4.0. This trimmer is the future of grooming, and I dare say the greatest trimmer ever. The fourth generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproofed and also has an LED spotlight for more precision shaving. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code C4FAP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com when you use the code C4FAP. That's the letter C, the number 4, FAP at manscaped.com. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
Aloha, this is Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing comic book creator Warwick Johnson-Cadwell. He is the writer and artist of the Dark Horse new original horror graphic novel, Falconspeare. It came out in January and is out in stores right now. Warwick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks, Jason. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, thank you very much. Now, for listeners, I just want to give you just a little bit brief background. Now, Falconspeare, is the third book from Dark Horse that features the characters as Professor Meinharten, Mr. Knox, and Ms. Van Sloan. These characters were in two other books that Warwick and Mike Mignola collaborated on. And these books, the first book that came out was Mr. Higgins Comes Home. That was released, and I love this date. It was released on October 31st, 2017. That is so cool. And the second book is Our Encounters with Evil, Adventures of Professor J.T. Meinharten and his assistant, Mr. Knox, that came out in 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah. Those are Mr. Higgins was Mike Mignola.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Mignola wrote it, and I illustrated it, and that was the beginning. That was sort of that was everything at the time. It was amazing. It was I didn't need to do another book after that. It's just that he's a legend, and we got to collaborate. But lucky enough, we got to do more. So yeah, very happy.
Yes. Now, before I start the interview, I'm going to just go over your history on Warwick. And Warwick, correct me if I'm wrong. So now you did concept art for the stop-motion animated movie, Laika's Missing Link, that came out in 2019. That won a Golden Globe Award for Best Animated Feature and was also nominated for an Academy Award. You also did concept art for also the stop-motion animated movie Chicken Run that came out in 2000, and also I'm going to try to pronounce this one, Aardman's Animation Pirates that came out in 2012. Is that correct?
Yeah.
No. And,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in terms of the concept artwork I've done, the animation, those are the ones that have sort of have been made, because this sort of work, there's lots of stuff that gets started and never finished, or lots of work you can get into stuff that doesn't you never know whether it's turning into anything, and of course everything's NDA'd.
Yeah.
So you don't know what you can talk about even when it's 10 years old or something like that. You don't know, but those are the main ones in terms of animation that are out there.
So yes, I'll be honest, I've heard of Chicken Run, I've heard of The Missing Link. I never heard of the Pirates one. And I'll be honest, I'm sorry. I've seen the trailers, I loved it. I kept going, I need to watch these movies. I never got around to seeing them, but I do want to see it though. These look fun, they look great.
Yeah, no, they're good. I mean, I knew, Aardman in the UK, they're a big deal, and that was the first job I got coming out of college. So that, but I completely know what you mean, because my list of books to read, films to see, it is massive, and it's embarrassing and worse when you know the people who were working on this, the people who wrote these books or drew the, and you're thinking, well, I've got to catch up, but there's, the mountains are high, and a lot to get through.
I'm going to continue on, Warwick, and then your work in the comic book industry. Now, I know you've done some work in something called Nelson in 2012, Solid State Tank Girl in 2013, and you also co-created with Robert Ball the webcomic Dangeritis that came out, was it 2014?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, Tank Girl would be the first sort of big book, so, that was published through Titan.
Yes.
And so, in terms of, holding my own first floppy comics and things like that, and working with Alan Martin, the original Tank Girl creator, with Jamie Hewlett, and on that character, the whole thing was amazing. But and I've worked with on Tank Girl, which, as I say, I mean, it was a massive big deal. They were a big influence, as I was a youngster reading comics, and I've worked with some very. I'm very lucky to have worked with, working with Mike Mignola and Dark Horse, and I did work also for on a series Samurai Jack, which for IDW, which another, it's a massive, but these are great sort of characters and things, but I really love working on things like Nelson and Dangeritis with Rob Ball, where, making these things ourselves, it's really way up there with working on some sort of super well-known characters. So
now, I know you already mentioned Samurai Jack that you worked on, called Quantum Jack. I know that was a 5-part series. And another IDW series that you worked on and that came out in 2016 was Helena Crash. That was a 4-part series.
Yeah. That was again. That was the writer Fabien Rangel Jr. He pitched it with my art to IDW. He had a lot of. We had suddenly a load of books out, but we were working on that. So that was a completely original idea. As is often the case with these, we didn't work together on it. He came to me with a story, the character ideas, and then I just sort of brought my end of it, my side of it. So that was a great character thing to create, and that's when things sort of got busy, because that was by the end of the series of Helena Crash. We were both working on Samurai Jack, and then that was the same time as Mr. Higgins got started. So everything got suddenly very busy.
Now, before I'm going to continue on. So Warwick, again, thank you very much for providing me with some of that information. And to listeners, I also got some of this information from the Comic Crusaders and John Suntress's Word Balloon YouTube podcast. So if you guys get a chance, please check out those Warwick's other interviews with the Comic Book Crusader and John Suntress's Word Balloon podcast. Now, Warwick, regarding your history of work, did I miss anything that you want to talk about?
Probably lots, but then I can't. It was sort of been messy. Whilst I've been drawing, whichever projects, whatever, I've been working on my own stuff for forever. But I also, coming out of college, was getting various bits of work in terms of illustration, animation, but then I had to do a day job. I was working, supermarkets. I was working at care homes, so there's been a lot of juggling all the while. So So yes, there'll be gaps, and I'll think of them all tonight, tomorrow. Don't worry.
All right. Now, before we really start getting to the questions, I want to give a big shout out to Hannah Bahedri of Superfan Promotions for setting up this interview and giving me an advanced copy of Falconspeare. So Hannah, thank you very much. Warwick, I'm going to give you. Do you want to add anything to that?
Just the thanks from me as well. She's great. Superfan Promotions are great, but Hannah's been really helpful this whole go round with Falconspeare. So thanks.
Yes, that's great. And then Warwick, I also want to thank you for being flexible with your schedule. So because listeners, originally we had a date set. I want to say it was probably sometime in February. But on my end, something came up at the last minute. So again, Warwick, I just want to say thank you very much for being flexible with your schedule. Thank you very much.
No problem. Happy to do it.
Now, where can listeners follow you on social media?
Best place, maybe I'm on Instagram at Wocco, WOCCO. That's where most of my attention is. When I get busy, it gets quieter, but that's where it is. But I'm on Twitter at Warwick JC, and Facebook as Art of WJC. So on there, and then I have a website which is a poor neglected thing, which has been around for a long time. Doesn't look very busy, but Warwick Johnson-Cadwell, one word, .co.uk. But Instagram, Wocco is the place to go.
Okay, all right. Then, where did you grow up?
We're in the UK. Sort of moved around a bit from the Midlands to the north, but most of my time on the south coast. So South Coast UK, sort of central South Coast UK.
And then what was or were your first comics that you read? And it could be anything from comic strips, Mad Magazine, or manga.
There would be some newspaper strips from would have been weekend supplements, sort of things, because there weren't many in the papers my dad would be reading. But yeah, no, kids comics. Then you get into the newsagent, and there'd be kids. It'd be the old sort of British stuff like the Beano and Whizzer and Chips, and sort of kids cartoon stuff like that. And then every now and then you'd find a newsagent that stocked American comics of one sort or another. But then another Asterix and Tintin were regularly reproduced here in the UK. That was bookshop stuff, but that's the nearest thing you'd find. I remember, in bookshops in those days. But other than that, 2000 AD, which is that's in my memory. I mean, there was a variety of action comics, war comics, but 2000 AD was kind of like, it's an anthology comic. It had everything. You had about 5 strips on a weekly basis, and Judge Dredd was always in there, but then there was others and different creators, different artists. There was such a variety. Awesome. So yeah, 2000 AD was the big one, and then more US comics. We'd find them. I'd find out there were comic shops about them, things like that, and so.
Okay, now. Drew, the co-host of Comics for Fun and Profit, submitted this question. What was your first comic shop?
That was we're not. It's not a big town where we are. It's not a big city. It's So I think I was just about big enough to get myself to London to some of the comic marts and shows there. And so we were just sort of reliant mainly on newsstand. But the first one that opened in our town in Chichester was this. It was a small unit. It's called a unit, and it was sort of an arcade. So, 15 square feet was about it. And that was Phantasmagoria. And I was at high school, and that was there for a few years. And then after that, a guy was working, a friend, the local video shop and video rental. And we'd be chatting to the guy who runs that. And one day he just had a briefcase of comics all out on the counter and realised he was a comic guy. we'd just come back from London, where I'd bought a bunch from Forbidden Planet, which was, you know, I'd travelled sort of 60 miles to get my comics if there were anything other I couldn't find in the newsagent. He opened a shop. He opened a unit pretty much in the same place as the original one that had closed down, Excalibur Comics, and that stayed in town for a while. So that was the first big deal, local comic shop.
Now, I know during the Word Balloon interview, you mentioned that you worked at a comic book shop on the weekends while going to college. Was Excalibur, was that the comic shop you were working at?
That was, yeah, Excalibur Comics. Mark Alford's comic shop. Again, yeah, he had it open, it was in a small unit, and then he opened up in a proper store just across the road. And so that was it. So I was working there weekends, you know, mainly just Saturday bits and pieces, but getting paid in comics. So taking home whatever I could.
Yeah, I'm just asking. So, how did you get that cool job?
Well, that was it. It was we you know, we'd go rent videos, rent movies, and he was there. And we'd got friends. We were chatting. We went in quite regularly, and then we discovered one day that he was a big comic fan. And so then with the conversations would get longer and more expanding rather than movies or whatever, but into books and comics. And he opened the stores, so he opened the shops. And so I was right there ready to give him a hand, help out in any way. And, you know, he was just opening up. So I was happy to just take some comics home.
That's pretty cool. Now, Warwick, this is an off-the-cuff question. It's not written down because did he bring in any comic book creators to doing, you know, in-store signings or anything like that, you know?
No, we didn't. I don't remember because I was at college, and then I went to Bristol, which is a million miles away. So I kind of, but he did. There was a guy. Yeah, there was a few guys, but more that came up through you know, they'd be going out getting their portfolios done. I'm trying to remember the name of this fella, but it is funny because now we have Ian Churchill. That's the guy I'm trying to remember. Ian Churchill he was a local guy, you know, and I didn't know.
Yes.
Mark knew him. Mark knew him whilst he was taking his portfolio, you know, around to the, you know, so when he started to get some interest from the bigger companies, from Marvel and whatnot, you know, but it was all too quiet, you know. I don't remember when, you know, it was after that he sort of was able to tell people about these big gigs, but that was going on there. So he was a local guy, and now relatively local to the area is Mick McMahon, who's a 2000 AD legend. So, you know, so he did, you know, he's the sort of guy, he was drawing the strips I was growing up reading as a kid. And so yeah, it turned out fun, but
that's pretty cool. Okay, so now how did your journey to work in animation and comics begin? I
sort of drifted the right way, sort of went with the tide. I've just always been drawing, you know, and so I've always loved drawing, the narrative side of it, and just, you know, working with various media. It's just always been a passion. And so even when I was doing day jobs and whatever, with, you know, got kids and stuff, I'd still be drawing. And so I did the degree. I did an illustration degree. This was at Bristol, which is a while away. And it was at the degree show where people from Aardman Animation spotted my work, which was kind of I can't quite tell, it was slightly more accidental because my work was up. And there was one sort of series of illustrations I'd done about a World War I fighter pilot who was a werewolf, and that was the story. And it was and so this was the thing that went up on the wall, and I kind of wanted something else there to pop out, and so literally, so I made up some paper planes, some biplanes, because this whole story was sort of what, and had them hanging around the artwork, because it didn't read as a strip. It was almost like what I tended to do was make stories when I was at college, and then after, they'd all be almost like not quite comics at that stage. They were more like a adult stories, but in a children's book format. So you'd read text and then image.
Yes.
But, and so to sort of bring out this artwork, I made some paper models of World War I biplanes, and it was those that I heard caught the eye of the Aardman guys, and so they came calling, because we'd all done our course properly, we'd all done our, we'd all got our names up and our cards to hand out, and that was what I remember was the thing that sort of that said, let's give this guy a try on this project and see what happens. So, and it was just that easy. So that was then, and that was just to start work on do some 2 weeks drawing for what became Chicken Run.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh my God! I'm sorry. It's just so cool that you're kind of going, okay, I'll put this up, and no, I want to make it a little bit. You wanted to stand out, and you made your own, World War I biplane and had it stick out, and that's just so cool. It caught someone's attention.
Well, this is the there's always just people who you want to give people good advice, and how do you meet people? How do you meet clients? How do you network and all this sort of stuff? And the best advice is just, you've got to work hard, because you've got to always be working, because these things are so, in the lap of the gods. It's just total fluke or luck, or you've got no idea when the right person's going to be seeing something, or when someone sees something and then they tell the right person. You've got no control over that. And, you can't afford to put your energy into trying to work out who's the right people to go out. You've got to be aware of what sort of business you're working in, and the right people to talk to. But you've got to not neglect the work part of it, because if someone sees your stuff and they say, hey, look, let's have a look, you've got to make sure that what you've got to show them is amazing.
Yes.
And so anything you can think of, you just don't know when those people are going to see. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of those things, because if you spend your whole time trying to think of some snazzy gimmick, something cool to encourage people, then you realize you spent your time working on the gimmick, and then your portfolio, your pages, your work isn't what you want to show. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just luck. I mean, it's different nowadays. In those days, you were sending out physical portfolios, and sending them overseas, and so getting your work seen was difficult if you want, because you had to go, people were heading for big cities where they could meet people and sort of show their work, get the stuff around that way. But now with the internet, it's in full flow. But again, the people you can contact or make contact with is amazing. But if you somebody of great importance to your plan sees your work, yes, or you manage to get it to them, or you talk to them, and then you've got to make sure what you've got to show them is awesome. Mm-hmm. And so the trick is always work, because it's just mad luck that's going to pop up more often than not. That's what's going to get there. So
that's pretty cool. That's really good. So now, Warwick, I'm going to ask you. So I know you start to work in animation on the comic side. So Drew again submitted this question. What was your first professional comic book work? That, because I know you did Dangerous as a web comic, but what about for like floppies and stuff?
That would be Tank Girls. So that would be. Oh,
that's right. I'm sorry.
No. The timelines sort of go all messy for me. There's a small press in the UK. That's what sort of got, after I came out of college, so I came out of university, and looking to animation and actually looking to sort of children's books or something. And sort of a kind of comics drifted by me at that stage. I was looking at something else, looking for something else, trying to see, and ended up drifting back toward comics. And so I could, looking at the books, thinking, well, what's my work suitable for, and trying to find a match. But the small press sort of scene, sort of people making their own stuff, that was pretty busy. So there was anthology comics that were around, or people sort of collaborating, and so those things were sort of popping up, and sometimes those were quite exciting. I did a couple of strips for a Polish anthology, which were just collecting British comic artists, which was an interesting thing. There was a couple of those, but when they came out, they were called New British Comics. I think there was only 3 books, but I had a strip in 2 and 3. But they felt, at the time, because nothing big had come out, they felt like the best thing ever. That was sort of printed work. And another one, Birdsong, by some friends at the time in the scene. But yeah, it was Tank Girl. So getting some Alan Martin, as I say, Alan Martin and Jamie Hewlett, the creators, and Alan the writer, got in touch. That was a great thing to do. So great thing to work on. So that was awesome.
How excited were you when you saw your name on the cover of Tank Girl or in the inside page? How excited were you when you saw it?
Well, yeah, it was amazing. It was, but I mean, it was amazing. But all the while, Tank Girl's a big character, and so the nerves had hit by that stage. The idea of it was brilliant, and in my mind, I was going to do a fantastic job, and it was going to be brilliant. And I was so excited to be able to join in to work with the Tank Girl character. But of course, the reality is, it's a massive, massive audience, and so there'll be the people who like it, and there'll be a lot of people who don't like it, and there are a lot of people who sort of need to get used to it. So I was very excited, but also very nervous when that book came out.
So, all right. So I'm going to move ahead. Warwick, we're going to talk about Falconspeare. Sorry, listeners, my mouth's not working today because yesterday I'm going Falconspeare. Yeah, it's not working. So correct me if I'm wrong, if I keep mispronouncing in Warwick. Okay. Now, before we talk about Falconspeare, may I ask, can you describe the trinity of characters? Professor Meinharten, Mr. Knox, and Ms. Van Sloan, to me and the listeners. Can you just describe those characters? Because
that was, well, just Mr. Higgins comes home, had Professor Meinhardt and Mr. Knox, and that was their debut. And so I then went back to, I just loved them. I loved everything about the book. Mike Mignola, I love his writing and the story. And these guys, everything about it, just every page I was drawing, I was thinking of more things I could draw, or more stories you could tell. But this was Mike's writing. So I went back to them, sort of just asked, these two guys, would I be able to just maybe try something out with these guys? I like Mr. Higgins, but I thought maybe Mike one day could come back and do work with him, because he was this. But these two, Meinhardt and Knox, I like the idea of them. So then I wrote the next book, which was, it's 5 stories, but sort of 3 stories over 5 chapters. So they were sort of short stories and quite different. And that's where Mary Van Sloan popped up as well, because these guys they are effective. They are vampire hunters, but they don't rely necessarily on chance, good luck to carry them through. But they are rescued more often than not by circumstance rather than training. And so So Mary Van Sloan sort of brings in a different element. You know, the professor's very academic. He's you know, this is sort of his world. He's investigating. He's interested. Mr. Knox kind of is following, obviously, the professor's footsteps, but he's got a, you know, there's a kindness and kind of a benevolence about him. He's sort of a, you know, he's got this sort of this goodness about him. And you know, he's a big fella, but you know, quite a sort of there's a gentleness, and so Mary Van Sloan, she kind of brings the action. You know, she's you know, she's going to sort of these guys going to snap out of it. She's going to get them into action, and so and that was it. So that was the Trinity there. I think, you know, that between them, you know, there was strength, but there was a fourth sort of pillar of this group, who is James Falconspeare. So he is the title character of the third book, and he brings to their group, you know, a sense of justice and a sense of sort of, you know, goodness, and you know, he's a real force for right. Whereas, you know, they're all good characters, they're all good people, but they do have different sort of strengths and sort of, you know, and James Falconspeare is a sort of a strong moral force, and that force in that group.
Now, without spoiling the story, because you already talked about James Falconspeare, he's, you know, that's the title of this book. You know, Meinhardt, Mr. Knox, Van Sloan, they are kind of like, I guess, like vampire hunters, I can call them.
Yeah.
And this is take place in like old Victorian England.
These guys have been Europe.
Okay.
But that's the right time. This is sort of the time of, or where Dracula was set, where Frankenstein was set, you know, Jekyll and Hyde, and there is this sort of stuff all sort of going on. So they're sort of non-specific sort of Europe, you know. There's sort of, I mean, Carpathian Mountains gets mentioned, so that's Transylvania, that's Dracula territory, and they're on the border of the Black Sea for a part of this book. So, you know, they're in the wild, sort of superstitious wilderness of Europe.
Now, I'm going to, without spoiling the story, and, you know, to the listeners, I've read the story, I love it, it's great. What is the story of Falconspeare about, without any spoilers?
We find the beginning of the book is back in time. Sort of the two books so far, the Mr. Higgins and the different stories in Encounters of Evil, I was sort of quite happy that they could have been, you could have picked up either book.
Yes.
You know, there isn't a chronology necessarily to them, but this starts, Falconspeare starts sort of back in time, before everything. This is them still in their formative sort of years, getting to grips with, you know, they're vampire hunters, but this includes werewolves and ghouls and monsters and, you know, many things they've yet to encounter. But so we see the four of them in action, and what has happened, we haven't seen James Falconspeare in the first two books, and so there's an absence. We know there's an absence because this is a new guy turned up, and the four of them were a tight sort of group, and over the years, Falconspeare has sort of wandered off and you know, appears lost. You know, he may be fighting creatures all around. He might have gone to different parts of the world. He's retired. He's just doing his, you know, maybe he's back at a university, just sort of collating all his information. But he's disappeared and hadn't been heard from until some clues start to turn up, which the three of them begin to realise might be an indication that he is around, and maybe they not know where to find him. So they go in search, and that's the book. That's the story that then unfolds.
Now, like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything for our listeners. Um, in the story, I love Ms. Van Sloan. I love her character because she's a very strong woman in this Victorian era. She's very capable of taking care of herself. I love it. She's great. I also there's one character, and again, listeners, you have to read the book. Is that I love the character of Baron Fontaine, and I just have to describe this one scene is when when the readers are introduced to him, he's kind of like the Jabba the Hutt. He's kind of sort of in a Jabba the Hutt pose.
Yeah.
Look, I love it. I love it. Like I said, I'm not going to say anything else, but it is just a great introduction of him.
Oh, that's cool. Well, no, and that's right. I hadn't thought of it, but I mean, and that's exactly right because he's sort of a gross, character. I mean, he's not a great character. He's not a goodie, but he's also kind of, he is awful, and that's it. That's the sort of, he's not a gangster, but that's, something like that, sort of eating frogs and dribbling all over people. That's not what. Yeah, that's Jabba the Hutt, but it's not. But no, that's. You just wanted him to, he's sort of unpleasant. I think was the plan.
Yeah.
Try and get that.
All right. Now I'm gonna. So, how did you come up with this idea for the story? Because it's a very good story. Yes.
Oh, really appreciate it. Thanks very much for that. That's very kind. But I sort of mentioned with just drawing the pages, drawing from Mike's script for Mr. Higgins, and just having fun. One of the great things of collaborating is that these ideas aren't mine. I'm working to somebody else's, plans. And there is, depending who you're working with and what they're doing, you can get scripts which are very specific. You can get scripts which are very vague. So you can start to work on it. And what I wanted to bring to this was, I really wanted to, but I was working with Mike Mignola, so I wanted to really go for it. So I wanted to work on detail, make the pages sort of quite full. And I also wanted to be able to make some books that you could read, and then you could read again, and you could read again. And hopefully the way the pages come across is that rereading it can be an enjoyable experience because there might be things that you find. I'm not sneaking things necessarily in, but there are bits in those pages that you might not see straight away. And my writing is quite. It's quite to the point. I'd like to get a bit more sort of verbose and have a bit more chat going on. But these books are quite speedy. So my writing, they're quite sort of a lean in those terms. And so to be able to go back and start again another time, I wanted to have a lot of information sort of in the pages. And that's where these stories then continue to come from, because as I'm drawing, I'm drawing with thinking about these characters, and so other ideas, or what if this, you're drawing you're drawing a scene, some of these castles and stuff have got weird paintings on the walls, and so you're thinking, well, actually this story, and I'm just drawing this, making up a painting, and this could be a story, or you've got ornaments, or you've got, is there a story behind this artifact? And this is how it is. I first drew James Falconspeare when I got the books. I got the books of Mr. Higgins, and I was at a show and I was drawing vampire hunters. I wasn't drawing necessarily. Well, I did. I drew Professor Meinhardt and Mr. Knox, and I was drawing some of the other characters in the book. But I was making up vampire hunters, and so the sort of first, I drew this character, which was sort of slightly different, but almost identical to James Falconspeare. He was possibly a bit older, and I think he had those old golf shorts that with the big woolly socks pulled up to the knees. So this was it. And so then you start to think, you've got ideas flying around and they start to kind of stick to other things. And I had this character I loved to draw. And then, some ideas, maybe as a bit of something that you were going to give to some other character or, and these things start to sort of stick together. And then you've got something that's sort of, you can start turning into a story. And that's, that's one of the things I love particularly about these books is that, I feel like the stories could go on forever because the more I'm drawing, the more ideas pop up about different things. But so that was it. It was just through these pages, always looking at ideas. I mean, looking for reference. You want to find the right sort of arches to build a creepy castle to draw, and looking at that sort of stuff. There's so much sort of you can take in. And as I say, some things, these stories sort of develop where sort of ideas sort of start to stick together, and then maybe you think, well, this sounds like this sort of story, but maybe if you take a left turn instead of a right, it turns into a different sort of story. And that's the sort of the puzzle. That's the fun of doing them. So,
wow, that's pretty cool. Now, I saw that you dedicated this book to your mom, and I'm going to quote it for the listeners. This one is for a mom who I think like this sort of thing. Now I'm just going to ask, are you okay talking about dedicating this book to your mom?
Yeah. That's cool. It was. We talked a lot about this sort of what Mike Mignola and I have in common that got us into this sort of thing was this love of horror cinema, Hammer horror films, Universal horror films, these sort of spooky things, and not necessarily, them exactly as they were, but more how the memory of them. A lot of these things I watched when I was a kid, when I was a nipper, and I, too young to see them. The black and white ones might be on in the middle of the day because they thought that was probably fine. And then some of the, the Hammer horror, that weird sort of not coloured blood, that stuff, whatever they used, all the weird, creepy makeup, which was often more sort of creepy than, whatever they were trying to actually make. But, those sorts of films. And the idea that sort of my memory of those films was sort of the basis of these books. The things like that I would have seen at my earliest age would have been because my mum was watching them. My dad wasn't so keen. He liked Westerns more like that. So it was that sort of thing. And my memory is that she was quite a fan of this sort of stuff. She didn't collect posters or whatever, she was quite a proper lady. And but I do remember, my first time set up watching Alien at a very young age, and sort of decided I was obviously too tired to carry on watching it just after someone just got their face minced, so went to bed after that. But so she liked these sorts of stories, and Dracula and things like that. So, and but this book was proposed and was at Dark Horse for approval just as lockdown started. And then as lockdown started, everything stopped. And so this was put on hold, which was completely, I was expecting it. It hadn't got to any particular stage yet. So I thought, well, there's people got work on that are being told to hold off. So I'll just write it out and see what happens. But then they came back and okayed it, and we went with it. So this was a project through lockdown, but also through lockdown, my mum suddenly got ill and died within about 5 weeks. This was not to do with COVID. This was other stuff. But and so a lot of that was going on while I was drawing these things, and we spent time. I've got a brother and two sisters, and we it worked out that we got to stay with her whilst, and sort of isolated. We were in a bubble as we have here. And all, while I was there doing that, I was drawing all sorts of crazy stuff at the same time. But so it felt like a good idea. It felt like I'd wanted to sort of put that as dedication to mom.
I'm sorry to hear about your mom. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for sharing, because like you said, it's the nice memories of when you're growing up watching, watching these horror movies with your mom on the television set.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, so Warwick, I'm gonna switch gears just a little bit, because you kind of know what next question is coming up, and it's a fun question.
Yeah.
Now, if you made this book back in the 60s and the Hammer Studios wanted to make a movie about Falconspeare, who would you cast as your lead roles?
Oh man, I've been mulling this over. There's because you're always thinking when you've got projects where you're looking at comics, you're reading comics, you're trying to fit actors to the various roles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's a puzzle. It's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of, not a Hammer film, but Fearless Vampire Hunters, the Dance of the Vampires. It's it's Roman Polanski. So but we know it in this country as Fearless Vampire Killers, I think. But I think it's Dance of the Vampires somewhere. And these, there's a lot of that in these books. But trying to work out which of the Hammer actors, it's been difficult. So I've what I would say before anything else, which I always think it's a great shame, is that Peter Cushing was never actually a vampire or anything, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
He got a few baddie parts in a couple of different things, but I mean, he would have made a cracking Dracula. I just think that he just would have been awesome at it. But, for the Meinhardt and Knox, Meinhardt, it wanders. It's the same time, the right time, but not necessarily the Hammer. But there's David Tomlinson, who was Mr. Banks he was in Disney stuff. So Mr. Banks from Mary Poppins, or Emilius Brown from Bedknobs and Broomsticks. He's sort of just this. So he could be a decent Professor Meinhardt, but then I started to get sort of grander, ideas. So I thought, well, maybe Alec Guinness could pop in there and do it. A good job. So he could, and Monty Python as well. Graham Chapman of Monty Python's going to be good. And then again, I thought Angela Lansbury, having thought of Emilius Brown, David Tomlinson for Meinhardt, I thought Angela Lansbury might be a good Mary Van Sloan.
She would be very good.
Thinking of the 1960s, and then Falconspeare, I think himself, Jim Brown or Fred Williamson.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You get these, because the way the character's drawn is not necessarily how you got. So I always loved Yaphet Kotto as well, and but I'm not sure. I'm just thinking, well, I'm not sure if he's quite right for it. It's like you're casting these things yourself, and suddenly it goes crazy. So. But that was interesting, and I got stuck with Mr. Knox, which in the Carry On films, there's a big guy called Bernard Bresslaw, but he normally plays a really dopey character, which I don't. Mr. Knox isn't.
Yes,
but he's sort of big but gentle. Unless he's throwing dynamite or stabbing things, he is. Yeah. So but it's a lovely exercise trying to work out who should go where and be what.
But I'm gonna say, Angela Lansbury as Ms. Van Sloan, she would be perfect. I'm gonna say, I think for most listeners, we would all remember her as from Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah.
This nice proper English. Yeah, it doesn't look like she would harm a fly or anything. But that changed. But I saw one episode where Angela Lansbury was in Law and Order SVU. And she was it was a complete 360 of her character.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, yeah, should be I think she'd fit as Ms. Van Sloan, where she'd be nice and proper, but if she needs to get things done quickly and right, she'll just do it.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, Warwick, I'm going to continue on.
Yeah.
I love your work on the colors in this book because, there's a nice contrast to distinguish the foreground and the background. I really love it. It's great. Now, I'm going to ask, do you want to give anyone else a shout, anyone else who worked on the book a shout out?
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, this is, it's a team. These guys are amazing. And, with these second two books, it's a lot of what's going on the page is mainly me, but then there's Clem Robbins with just awesome work on top. The lettering is lovely through all these books and the books he works with. But, and then the editing team as well, which is Katie O'Brien and Jenny Blank, and Clem Robbins with letters. These guys are just bringing it. They're pushing me. I don't mean they're actually pushing me, but they're getting me. I'm doing this, and they are pushing me when I'm slow, and which does happen. And then just to have these have got Mike Mignola covers with Dave Stewart color, and it's a dream. These are books I'd be picking up. And then, to see that these are my stories inside, it's just a real privilege. But they're a great team. Dark Horse are just awesome. So thank you.
Oh no, you're welcome. Now, I know you can't. I know if you can't say anything, that's fine. But will we see another adventure with Professor Meinhardt, Mr. Knox, and Ms. Van Sloan in the future?
I hope so. Okay. Each book is finished without another next one planned. As I say, I finished Mr. Higgins just like I, died and gone to heaven. It was just like the most fantastic thing. And so the prospect of, I finished it without a thought about another one because it couldn't get better, unless there was a second book. And then there was. And then there's a third. So I've got away with a lot. So I don't know. I sincerely hope so, because like I say, there's just so many more stories to tell with these characters.
Now, fun question. Any possibility of these characters doing a multiverse crossover with Hellboy? I
don't know. I doubt it. Well, I don't know. I mean, actually, because there's the Hellboy universe, then there's the Outerverse stuff. And this is out even from that. And there's something I like about it. It's quite exclusive. It's just, which I do like. But then that could be awesome. But I just don't know how it would. It would be great fun. But we'll see. With no plans. But as I say, I quite like this little sort of corner of the playground by myself. So.
All right, I'm going to continue moving on. Now I know there was a Kolchak 50th anniversary Kickstarter. I know you and Nancy Collins, the writer, did a short story for this project. Now I'm not gonna ask you to spoil the story or anything. Are you a Kolchak fan?
Yes. Nancy Collins' story is amazing. So I'm really lucky that we got partnered up for that. And yes, and it's mad because I only recently become a Kolchak fan. I knew of Kolchak and it's his influence, its influence on the X-Files, its influence on all sorts of the writing of it, and it's always been on that we mentioned right at the beginning, that pile of books to read or things to watch, or and it was just, I'd never got around to it. Then people would, it would be mentioned, I've got to do that, I've got to catch up with that.
Yes, yeah.
And I did catch up with it. And of course, lockdown helps. And then it popped up on Amazon Prime, I think it was. But just before, I think it's just been re-released. It's a Blu-ray. But anyway, so I got through. But there's a couple of the two TV movies are on YouTube.
Oh, yes.
I think are online. And I watched the series, and I watched it not in the correct order, but I watched the first of the TV movies, then watched the series, and then watched the second of the TV movies. And it feels like the perfect way to watch it because it made so much. I don't know. I can't, having seen it like that, I'd imagine it makes less sense than if you watch the first two TV movies, then watch the series. I like it this way around. But then this was my first view of it, so that's how it comes out. But no, and so it was. So I'd just been catching up with it, and then I was invited to join in with the Kickstarter. So it was just great because I was just loving it. It was, that old sort of TV series, that stuff would have been around.
Yes.
Had I been up late enough watching it, and it just went past. I don't know if it was on telly at any stage in the UK. I mean, bearing in mind, we had 3 channels when I was young, and then we got to 4, and then stretched to 5 before. So that was we could watch was sort of odd times a day, and so. But no, I loved it. I love it. It's so there's lots to like about it, and so. And the Kickstarter, the special is going through a certain time. The way it's going through his lifetime, as it were.
Yes.
Which I know you've spoken about, but so it's an ideal spot. So we're in the 90s, and so that ties in nicely with one of its big one of the series it influenced in a large way. So it's handy because obviously he's sort of very much sort of preempts the X-Files, or they used a lot from that, and helpfully Arthur Dales, of course, he played. I've completely lost his name, but the actor, Kolchak actor, Darren McGavin. He played Arthur. He was Arthur Dales in the X-Files in the 90s. So he pops up. Several brothers called Arthur Dales, so he pops up in 2 episodes, and then the next time Arthur Dales pops up, he's somebody else. And then there's also anyway. Point being, it's him in the 90s, so that was quite handy to get some reference. So
I can't.
I look forward to seeing it. Yeah, it's going to be great. So
I know I can't wait to see that. I backed the project. I can't wait to get my book later this year.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'm slowly wrapping this up. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You're a boat skipper?
Yeah. Well, this was university. I was at Bristol, and which is away. There's animation bits and pieces there, but we came back to home, back to where we were before, which because things got easier. The internet is the internet, and so being able to work from home with my job is a distinct possibility. So we came back to where we were living before. My wife now, my girlfriend then, and this is it's on the coast. I was doing working on a boat, crewing in school holidays and weekends and stuff. When I wasn't at comic shop, it was little jobs and lots of them when I was a youngster. And so then I continue. I got my license, and so that was one of the jobs that I've been doing at the same time as various art jobs. Trying to carve my way or get ahead in the art world. But you have to rely on other income bits and pieces. So yeah, tour boat. It's 22 years, 23 years, 24 years this year, I think. So around the local harbour.
That's nice.
So which is a big change from sitting at a desk
Mm-hmm.
or looking at a computer. So, I almost guarantee that the rainy, wet days will be the days I'm out on the boat, and the days when it's sunny and warm is the days I've got the blinds down and sitting at my computer. It's almost a guarantee.
Mm-hmm. All right. Couple more questions. What is the most fun or exciting thing that you love working in comics?
Oh, there's lots. I think it's just the work itself, the drawing, the working it out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play video games,
Mm-hmm.
and I barely manage to keep up with any reading. It's like doing a puzzle every day. It's like reading a story, drawing whatever is like reading a story. It's it's entertainment, and it's working. You're working things out.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain's going. You're learning. You're looking for reference. You're trying to work out this, that, and the other. So there's loads to do just with the sitting down and drawing of it. So which is back when I was just doing this and by myself with no work, but was doing the drawing, was doing the stories or whatever. That was good fun. But being able to do that and then get paid for it, that's also fun. So, but there's a million different bits. There's so many different elements, people, and getting to meet different creators or people involved in the in the process. People like yourself as well. It's just a lively world. It's a busy world, and so it's good. It's great.
All right. Now, I know I already asked you this question, but I'm going to ask it for the listeners. Have you and your family been to Hawaii?
No, sadly not. Not so far. It's on the list of places to go. So
Mm-hmm.
not brilliantly travelled. It'd be interesting. I'm just interested to go to see, our view of Hawaii when here in the UK it may well be very different
Mm-hmm.
to the real life of it. But no, fascinating place. I'd love to go.
All right. Any closing words to our listeners?
Well, Falconspeare is out.
Mm-hmm.
Kolchak, the Kickstarter is, you can still back. I think it's closed.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a facility if you go to the site that you can join in still at this stage. Yeah. I don't know how long that runs for. I'm working on a project which is a difficult thing to talk about because not only is it's a project of mine, a comic project, an original project. The publishers are not yet announced.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just that the book's not announced, but
Mm-hmm.
the publisher isn't announced. So that should be sort of some light should be shed on that over the next sort of weeks or months or something. So,
okay.
So that'll pop up on those social media links. But yeah, other than that, thanks very much. I hope they found something of interest to listen to.
Warwick, I want to wish you all the success with Falconspeare. And, mahalo. Thank you in Hawaiian for your time and giving me the opportunity to interview. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Good to meet you, Jason.
Thank you. And then I also want to thank Hannah of Superfan Promotions for help setting up this interview and giving me a review copy. Again, Hannah, thank you very much. If you are a new comic book fan or a lifelong comic book fan, please check out Falconspeare, an original horror graphic novel from Dark Horse. I want to thank Drew, the co-host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.
Aloha.
Our LCS is Cowabunga Comics out of Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, and their mail order company, Deep Discount Comics. And we went there, and we were actually invoice number 00001.
We were the very first their very first customer, which was kind of cool. They've been nothing short of fantastic, customer service wise. Discounts, they were very close, if not the same or better than DCBS on a lot of things. Over and above, customer service wise, always taking care of us, going the extra mile, so responsive, getting instantaneous responses back to questions about things, and to the point where knowing the stuff you like and anticipating your needs and having it suggested that you might want to add this to your order already before you even have to think about it. That's kind of cool. Really quality experience. So we love working with Cowabunga and Deep Discount, and that's why they're in our show notes every single episode, and have been for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes. That we leave them there because we like them. They're cool, good people. That's why they're in there. By God, they'd tell you to, if you've got a local comic book shop that you love, stay with them, because everybody needs to support their local comic shops. But if you're looking, check them out. You can check them out in the show notes. There's plenty of ways to get a hold of them. Either get on their list, just so you can check and see what kind of FOC and pre-order stuff they have and the discounts, and they'll send it to you each month, get you on that email list. And you can check out their shop, because they have a great shop of exclusive Cowabunga variants. Amazing stuff. Yes, they've always been there for us, and we take them for granted. So there you go. Now you know.